as committee chair. I will be presenting the program along with Dr. Jason Hoeksema of the University of Mississippi, and he is one of the monitors of eBird. You see these photographs up here. In a minute I'm going to explain to you why they keep scrolling around. I was wanting to thank Libby, which I don't see Libby this morning. She's maybe not a Saturday person, but in case we'll thank Nick Winstead back there, the state ornithologist here at the museum, for helping us get this auditorium to present this program. Thanks, Nick. Welcome, birders, backyard bird watchers, bird nerds, photographers of nature and birds, wing nuts, people who know what wing nuts are, bird freaks, and all bird enthusiasts, no matter what the degree of bird watching you enjoy. Welcome. Several years ago, when I would do a program, my wife would tell me, being that she was a school teacher, she said, what you should do is maybe tell a joke or two and enlighten everybody, kind of get the mood going, break the ice type of thing. And of course, this being about birds, I'll only know 3 jokes about birds. 2 of them, my wife said, if you tell them, then I will disown you. They aren't fit for here, but the third one is basically the one about the chicken crossing the street, and that's so old. It's not even funny anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little story that happened to me years ago when I was taking boot camp for the Army in 1976. And the title of the story is Saved by the Quail. Not saved by the veil, but saved by the quail. The scene is, my whole platoon has marched out into the pine trees in New Jersey, Fort Dix, New Jersey. And of course it's in the middle of summer, it's hot. The Army people like that put you on these forced marches, and when they get you to where they want to have little training sessions, they break you off from the rest of the company and platoons and go to a little vacant spot out in the woods where they cut out, so you can have the sergeant give the program. So we've done that. We've walked down the little road, gotten into the big set of bleachers there, the whole platoon. I was the platoon leader. And the officers have pulled up in their Jeep, and dust is flying everywhere, and after dust settles, the sergeant starts his program. And he's up on a podium that's probably 12 foot square, maybe this far up off the ground, to give him a little elevation to talk to his peons in the bleachers there. And the officers are down on this end, and they're sitting in their Jeep watching what's going on. And if you know anything about Army situations, the sergeants are the bad ones, they're the real ones that always are doing things with the peons. And so he starts his little program. As he did, I kind of, out of the corner of my eye, down that little dusty road, I saw something go across the road. Didn't really see what exactly it was, but I knew it was a ground type bird. Well, I kept my eyes cut that way a little bit, and all of a sudden here comes a adult quail, runs across the opening, through the dust, kicking up a little dust trail. So I was kind of snickering a little bit to myself, and the guy next to me says, look down the road, watch down the road. So sergeant's up there, and he's still being real mean, all this Army people out there, and it wasn't long. Well, here goes 2 or 3 babies scurrying across there. And the last one hit a pile or so of the dust that was kind of deep, and it tumbled along and got back up on its feet, scurried on off across the trail. So by then, after several minutes, there was probably 10 or 15 people right around my close proximity that were watching these baby quail go across the road. And this went on for, I counted up to a dozen. And by then, a good portion of the whole platoon had been watching these little quail go across the road, and several of them got snickered and pointed and all sorts of stuff like this. So the drill sergeant stand up on the podium up there. He looks at me, and I couldn't help but just grin real big. So he jumps off that podium. He runs right down in front of me, straightens his Smokey the Bear head up, pokes that chest up to me, and walks up to me real close like this. He says, "Knight, don't you want to share with the whole platoon what you're laughing at? What is so funny?" So my heart's beating 90 miles an hour, and I said, "Yes, Sergeant, I would be glad to share my funny sight to you." He said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "Well, down the little road there are quail running across the road." Of course, he looked around at the officers, and he looked back at me, and he said, "Knight, if you're lying to me, you'll give me 50 push-ups. No, you'll give me 75. Quail running across the road, you'll give me 100 push-ups." So I said, "Yes, Sergeant." Well, about that time, and while this is going on, I'm wondering, I've counted 12 babies. I'm sure there's going to be one more. So the whole platoon, and the officers and the sergeant looking down the little road. And we're going. And all of a sudden, the last little quail comes across the dusty road, trips over a big old clod of dust, tumbles around, gets up, off into the woods. And the whole platoon just laughs, and the officers are laughing, and the sergeant just turns around like this and gets back up on the podium. Fun. That was fun. That was fun. Well, I guess you've been watching these slides for at least 15, 20 minutes. Ever since you've been here, all these slides have been showing. And you're probably wondering why we're doing this. Maybe just enjoying the slides, or maybe trying to ID them, I don't know. But I want to make this point that one of the reasons why we're giving this program is because it seems like years ago I had the same kind of problem. So I said, well, what I want to make sure that you people know that you're amateur bird watchers. There may be a scientist in here, I don't know, that's a really sure enough ornithologist, maybe Nick back there. But all these photographs you see right here were taken by an amateur bird watcher. All these slides of these are review species. These are rare birds in the state of Mississippi. Every one of them were taken by an amateur bird watcher. So what I want to press upon you now is that you don't have to be the smartest thing in the world to do what we do. You don't have to have a degree in finding a rare bird. This is proof of it right here. I don't know whether you've seen the one slide, the last phenomenal thing that happened by an amateur bird watcher, a little lady down on the Gulf Coast. Reported to, I think, Chris, a few down there, that she had a leisurely bunting come into her feeder. Well, let me tell you, there's only 3 records of leisurely bunting in the whole state of Mississippi, and very few east of the Mississippi River. But she did it, and she contacted somebody. She made a point of telling someone that cares. And that's what this kind of program's about. And what we're going to do from this point on after this, we're going to show you the importance of you as an amateur bird watcher participating in what we're doing here with records and that kind of thing, the data. We think your data and the things that you're seeing are just as important as anything else. This is a checklist of the birds of Mississippi. And more than likely, 75% of all the birds on that list are by amateur bird watchers. Just like you. Just like you. Okay, we need to probably change now, start the program. But I just want to make sure that, anybody can do this. And so what we're going to try to do this morning is direct you in how to do it, when to do it, filling out report forms and such. Reporting birds and keeping bird records, why and how, that's kind of what we think our program is entitled. When Chris and I and maybe a few other people started having a conversation back several months ago, I quickly realized that I ran into the same thing 30 years ago. So what I believe that needs to be done with all this situation is just take you back into history and show you how it came along and show you what those people went through and show you that what you're going through now is nothing unique. Things have drastically changed.
Skip the slide.
So early birding started out like that. Those are two specimens of birds that no longer exist, possibly. The bottom left one, Ivory-billed woodpecker, and the one on the right, Bachman's warbler. Those specimens were taken from the state of Mississippi back in the 1800s. So it is the era of the shotguns, collections of birds and skins were all done. Lots of well-to-do people would hire people to go out and shoot the birds and put them in their little collections and stuff. And then a bunch of the big museums, Smithsonian and a lot of the museums over the country realized that this was what they needed to get. So they would contact these people who had these large collections of birds in all these states, and they would put them in their museums. These two birds right here are not in Mississippi. We don't have them in this museum. They're, I think, one of them may be Smithsonian, and another one up east. And you can tell by Mr. Audubon and Mr. Wilson, they got their blunderbusses with them. They love to collect birds, put them in museums, make skins, because that was the thing. All the documentations of birds and plants and animals that was the thing back in the late 1800s, because there was no data for all these things. So this is what they did. Audubon collected on the Mississippi River around Vicksburg, I think Lincecum, then he did a lot of work over there. So this was how this birding actually started everywhere. Notice this young man here doesn't have a gun with him. He's actually the man who started Christmas bird counts. He had lots of friends that after the Christmas meal, they would go out and see how many birds they could shoot. I killed 75. Well, we got 80. So Mr. Chapman convinced all these people that what they needed to do was to go out and count the birds. And that's where Christmas bird count started. And probably Christmas bird counts probably had a lot to do with how birding as a hobby really took off in the United States and everywhere. This next slide is the techniques and tools of 20th century birding. And you see the last part there says pre-technology, really. No email, no cell phone, no digital camera. I know my wife will love this. When I showed that slide to Jason said, "Who's that woman in the middle there?" You notice in my pocket up there is my glasses and a little notebook. Scope over shoulder, binoculars around the neck. Okay, the first part is optics. You know, the trade, tools of the trade, the optics, binoculars, scopes, whatever. But this is an old pair of Tascos that we first started out bird watching with. Something real simple. And there's, I look at that old tripod, and that old torpedo scope really wasn't a birding scope, it was a spotting scope. This thing on the bottom there is a window mount. I was introduced to a window mount by Marvin Davis back in the middle 80s, and it would be 20 degrees, and we were sitting on top of one of the great big lakes up there, and the wind blowing 20 miles an hour, and it sure was nice using that window mount. And we still use one at this point. Next thing in tools of the trade are field guides. And you can tell by that one on the left there that it's well used. I would do a warbler workshop over the past, and people want to know how I learned warbler so quick, and I'd take that book and I'd throw it down on the table. And I'd say, until your bird looks that ragged and torn and used, you won't know. You won't know. I've always liked the Peterson because in the Peterson guide, it's got arrows that show you what to look for in a bird. A good friend of mine, Jeff Wilson out of Memphis, Tennessee, when we first met him, one thing he would tell us, he said, quit looking at the bird. What are you talking about? Look at what's on the bird. Because each species has certain diagnostic features you look for. And guys like the Peterson, I think Kaufman, I think his book's got the arrows. But I think that's very important for you to know so you won't confuse one species with another. Very important. I don't know why Jason put that little yellow book on there, but my 4th grade teacher gave me that book.
Wow.
And it probably had 20 birds in it. There was a yellow book, and a blue book, and a red book. At the time when we began bird watching in the middle 80s, you didn't have these birding guides to states where it told you where to go look for each species. That was just non-existent. We did have, 87, we did have this first book, Birds of the Coast, would help you when you went to the coast, and so on. And I've told this to Jason and a couple other, well, J.R. Rigby, an upstart bird up north Mississippi, that the 3 things that were most important to me when I learned birds was my binoculars, my field guide, and this. Is there another one there? Yeah. You see coffee on it, you see it's all tattered and worn, and when I ran into this Jeff Wilson guy and Good Coffee up in Memphis, Tennessee, they had this thing published. Because when we birded, we were like you, we looked at everything. We knew that hummingbirds weren't around in the wintertime, didn't know why. We didn't know when the warblers came in, when they migrated through, the sparrows, all those species, we didn't know that. But once we got this little seasonal occurrence, you can see what it's got on there. It shows you where every species comes in. If you look at the ducks, there's a pointer. See the ducks over here when they come in the fall? And see when they leave. That's why you don't see ducks in the summertime hardly. Well, this whole little booklet right here had this for every species that was in Shelby County, Tennessee, and Memphis. So I figured, well, we're not 60, 70 miles away. It can't be a whole lot different. So this was one of my items that I used. If I found something that was out of those dates, then I knew it was something worthy. And in my journal, I made notes of it. I just wanted to show you this. In 1960, this is what the Mississippi checklist looked like.
That's the whole list?
That's 290, there's another page of it.
Oh.
But I mean, you look at some of these names on this thing, you look at this man of war bird. Look at great egret, American egret.
Water turkey, what's water turkey? Is that, what is that?
And hinger.
Huh?
Louisiana heron. It's pretty neat stuff, isn't it? That's what it was then. That's about the first or second list. And here's something that stands out right here also. The list is based on collections made in Mississippi. When we started bird watching and we found rare birds in the 80s, the records committee says, you're one single person, we will not vote on your record. I mean, that's where it was then, because they had collections, they had a specimen of everything that was on that list. That's how tight and how hard it was to get started birding. So you know, we fought a bunch of battles between ourselves. Do we want to keep on bird watching, or we want to play with the big boys? And in 1962, it jumped up to 317. Some of the names are still the same, some are different. But I just wanted to see you, look at 3 cents per copy. Now, when we learned from the older birders at that time how to attract birds closer to you where you could see them, these are some of the items that we used. Man, you could play that around spares, it'd drive me nuts. But that was one of the things. Have you ever seen one of those? Do people use those now? Some do. The little attractor thingy there, I don't know, it was a little tape recorder of a screech owl. And that's where that first got started. Of course, then up on the right up there is your cassette player, which was the only thing you could do with it. You had to buy tapes of all the birds, all their songs, to play them on those cassettes. You didn't have a computer or an iPad or a cell phone to pull up all that instantly. Communication. I find a rare bird, what I do. Crank up the car, go to the nearest payphone, make a phone call. And if you happen to have 5 guys, 6 people in the state that you want to call, well, you did it. And they would call people also. But that was it, the old rotor. These were the items that we used, some of them. I found this birding by ear. I don't know whether it's online, whether you can still get this stuff with it. It was probably one of the greatest things I bought, trying to figure out different warbler sounds, that kind of thing, because they put 4 species that were real similar and told you how to pick the differences. And Bill Turcott, whom everybody in the museum around here knows and heard of, did this Mississippi bird songs. And that's a picture of course, a little notepad and journal. I would take me a little notepad, keep it in my pocket, and it got to where every bird I saw, heard, or whatever, I got it on the pad. And I wasn't very blessed with much smarts in those days, and I didn't really know how to spell a lot of the birds' names, so when I would get home, I would get my journal out, my record book, and I would put everything that I'd put in that little note tablet in there in my journal. And if there was something specific that I wanted to know about 1 or 2 of the birds, I would put that in there. This is the Grinnell system, and this was designed years and years ago when all these collections started. They had to have some kind of system that everybody was on the same page with, so no matter who the collector was, who that was taking all the data down, I mean, they may spend 2 or 3 weeks on the road, They may bag up 150 things and send back to the museum or send back, so they all had to have a card in there, a label, something that told everybody what they needed to know. And this was one of the reasons, one of the systems like it still exists today. We'll talk about a little more about that more in a minute. What to write down? Just as I just said, the items on the left side of that slide, I scanned that journal, March of 1984. First barn swallows arrived in the Yaqui River. Purple finch male hit a window of Tanya and Shannon Hill till it flew. Wood duck pair nesting in a pileated woodpecker tree. Just, little things. Ruby-throated hummingbird female arrived. And on the right is one by Jason that he had done years ago. And that was his little notation. He had a little drawing. Looked like a kingfisher maybe.
Cowbird.
Cowbird. Sorry.
I'm not a good artist, but it really does help you to remember things. Just the act of writing it down, making a drawing, helps you learn and helps you remember. That makes for good memories too.
Just like it says in there, the species, arrival, departure days, breeding records, movements made. I mean, these are the kind of things that you put in your journal, because someday down the line you can pull from it. And see, that's not a great drawing, but it depicts what needs to be depicted. Got the species name on there, with adult, the date, where it was. Little arrows pointing to some of the features on the bird. Another drawing. This one's Jason's. Hudsonian Godwit. Where's his legs?
He was up to his belly in water.
So see, it can be fun. I mean, you don't have to be an artist. If you are, that's fine and good. Now, that you've bird watched, you've maybe done some of these things that I've shown you, and you go, what species are important and what are unusual? Well, you don't really know, do you? Unless you've got something that will tell you that. Our checklist, this is the latest checklist, and it's got little codes on the right side over here. Tells you what each one of them means. A, of course, is accidental. Common is, C is common. Some are common in a certain time of the year. This checklist tells you your business information. And we got them available for you today. This is one of the items that we put out, the Mississippi Ornithological Society Bird Records Committee. And birds that need to be reported to us are on this list. These are the rare or uncommon species. And we usually have, is the 3x5 next? Those species record card. We've got some of them available up here that you can pick up for go-bys if you need them. But it listed pertinent little facts on that uncommon to rare list species, whether it was a site record, photograph, whatever. Significance. Little details and description of it. You can see that there's different others, like the only thing you need that's really important on the coast is those 6 species there, 5 species. Some species that are away from the delta and coast. Those species are not very common away from those areas. everything on this left side is anything in the state of Mississippi that's any of those species that we're interested in keeping up with. They're not real rare, but they're very common. All this data that is turned in on these certain species goes into one of the issues of the state's journal, Mississippi Kite. It's kind of called Birds Around the State, and it takes all you people's little information that you send in, and it comes out in an issue. Some of them are also put into American Birds, which is a national magazine that goes out all over the country. Uh-oh, can I turn it off? This list are the rare accidentals, first state records type of things. These ones that we want a full documentation of. Every year at our meeting, we evaluate all this data that comes in from you people. And if there's a certain species on there that hadn't been seen in 10 years, well, we jump it up from the rare and uncommon and put it back up on the review species. It used to be evening grosbeaks were real common in Mississippi in the wintertime. Well, there hasn't been one of those seen in the state of Mississippi for 10 or 12 years, so it's back on the list down there, right there. Okay, this slide's other benefits of notes. So when we were birding, when we started, the way we kept up with our personal lists, whether it be state, whether it be United States or whatever, we did it our own self. We kept up with that. And through joining NABA, you could submit your numbers to ABA, like you had 250 species in the state of Mississippi and maybe 200 in Tennessee or wherever. Or if you birded all over the United States, you would have 400 or 500 species in it. So you kept up all that by yourself. You kept up with all this information yourself. And through 10, 12 years of keeping your data yourself and keeping it in journals where you can sit down and read it, that kind of thing, then you see these trends. Until I did all that, I didn't know when any of these species came into Mississippi. I didn't know when they left. I do a yard list. I've done it for 30 years in my yard. And one year, I realized in December there wasn't any blue jays in my yard. Didn't see blue jays for 3 months. So I'm going, what's going on this year? So I got my old data out, and I got to looking back through there, and lo and behold, every year, late November, early December, the blue jay disappeared from my yard. But I didn't know it. So that's what all this information can do for you. And the last thing that you can tell, you can pick up seasonal trends by doing this. And we do that in the state through your information that you give us. This has been going on in the state for probably 50 years now. So we can take that data and we can see what's becoming trendy one way or the other.
Where were your blue jays?
I mean, I wouldn't even hear. I don't know. They probably were taking young off, dispersing them the next year, whatever. I don't really know. Okay, now we're down to birding techniques of today. Tools of the trade. Are you ready? Modern optics, digital cameras. Look at that big scope on the left side over there. In the 80s, I'm sure there was more than what I realized different optics were about, but there wasn't very many. But now, I mean, you know, there's probably 50, 75 different people making optics now. And with digital cameras, I mean, you don't even have to be a bird watcher. You don't even have to be anything. You can just take that digital camera and you can make a picture of anything you want to, be it a flower, be it a bird, be whatever. 3 or 4 years ago, in my part of this, the Records Committee, what was going around with the Records Committee people in the United States were, all of a sudden, there was all these photographs of these rare birds by nature photographers. Not even bird watchers. What do? We don't even have a record of that bird, yet this photographer's taken one for 5 years in a row. So we had to kind of adjust our feelings about who was a bird watcher, who was a nature photographer, and the validity of it, and how well it would fit into the bird data of that state. And we've done that. So these modern techniques are real fantastic. Maybe Jason will say what they did.
Well, on the left there, that little Philips unit is a little MP3 player. You know, download birdsong's digital files onto it. Can hold all the bird songs of North America on that, little 2-inch device, and then little portable speakers there, battery powered. So, in theory, you can be in the field and play any song you want from your pocket as long as you keep the batteries charged. And then on the right there, does anybody recognize that? What that might be? Yeah, it's a recorder, and I call it a bird voice recorder. And yeah, so that's for recording bird songs. So. You might be out in the field and just hear something really interesting, turn that thing on and record it, and then you get home and you've got a digital record of it, and you can really learn bird songs that way. I teach ornithology, and I have a few recordings of, just the morning chorus. I can play that in class, and the students can try to pick out all the different bird songs, and it's just a nice tool.
My cassette player kind of played out a year ago. Of course, and I'm just not wanting to get into the future, hard-headed. So I went to all these little shops, Radio Shacks, whatever, trying to get me a new cassette recorder. Well, those people looked at me and you must be crazy. You can't buy those anymore. And field guides, lots and lots of field guides nowadays. They're specialized, each group of birds has their own ID book now. There's a lot of information out there, but these things aren't any good unless you don't sit down with them. Birding's not easy. Birding is work. You have to spend some time with your brain, your eyes, searching through some of these books and checking on these errors and what to look for what makes one bird another, and it's not, you got to know the differences, that kind of thing. Here we are, back to the same thing. Can't emphasize that enough, really. If you really want to be the best at being an amateur bird watcher, then these kind of things are very important. You can even, is this part of yours or not? Now, what most people are using is eBird. It's easy. It does everything for you that we used to do on our own, which is real easy. It keeps your state list, your county list, your location list, your whatever, your list, the whole 9 yards. And this is just a page out of it. It's got their bar graphs, same thing as I showed you a while ago. eBird has their own. And eBird is so new that they really don't have as much data as they would like to have. That's why they're really wanting everybody to plug in and put their data in there.
Especially around here.
Mississippi's lacking pretty good.
Yep, there are places in the country where there are tons of data and lots of people using it, and other places where not as many people are using it yet. So we really need more data in our area.
This is something we really want to plug also. This is the Mississippi Bird List Serve. This is the last, I think it's one of the last ones that Jason put on there from the 16th of June. And if you're not familiar with Miss Bird, it's a pretty cool little instrument. You can go on there and put your sightings on there. When anybody asks any questions at all, really. But you can put photographs on there, and it's a great communication way.
It's an email listserv, so you just send an email to Miss Bird, and it goes to everyone who's subscribed to it. And then this is a screenshot from the archives that you can see online. But if you want to know how to sign up for Miss Bird, we can give you information about that afterwards.
Fun part. Right here, it's the fun part. Keeping your records. This is something we've already talked about. Usually birds keep track of all your sightings. And after lunch, Jason's going to go into more detail about eBird and the feature. Here we are, the Mississippi Ornithological Society. This is our web page. We got flyers up here available if you want to join MOS. We got flyers up here that gives you all the information. And you can see there's different links there to go to different things on there. Nick recently has put all the entire collection of Mississippi kites, that's our bird journal, online, PDF format. The next meetings are on there. Records committee stuff is on there. Go to that site, it's a nice little site now. Can we say enough about that?
Probably not.
Back to the list. I don't think we need to say any more about those. Here is the documentation form that we require when you have a review species, and it requires this long, detailed form to fill out because we want to know everything that you possibly can put on there that you encountered with that bird. Of course, the species name is at the top, the date, time of observation. If you saw it at 9 o'clock and it left at 9:05, that's what we want. If you saw it at 9 o'clock and you were still there at 10 o'clock, that's what we want. The length of the observation. We want to know how close you were from that bird or how far you were from it. We want to know whether you were looking through your naked eyes or whether you were looking through binoculars, that kind of thing, whether there's a scope, the optics that you use, the location. Now that may be just a little bit vague because when you're dealing with lots and lots of people, sometimes all they'll put on there is the nearest town and state. But the location means where you saw it. If it was 5 miles north of Jackson on I-55, that's what you want. But the nearest town will be whatever. Some people don't understand that quite. Light conditions, describe the sky and your position of the bird and sun. That's probably one of the things that really tickles me when I read some of them. Because sometimes they'll say, well, it's a clear day. But what we want to know is if you're looking at the bird and the sun is behind the bird. We want to know if you're looking at the bird and the bird is behind you. We want to know what kind of light you got on the bird. Because if you haven't birded very long, or if you've birded 7 or 8, 10 years, you're learning real quick that light can play tricks on you, doesn't it? And this is the kind of thing we want. Observers with you, whatever, if it's only you and your wife, you and your friends, 5 or 6 people, whatever. And if you know, if somebody found a bird and you went to go see it, well then you put your name up there and you put on there other observers who saw the bird independently. If you know any, then you put them on there. Because sometimes you will go see a bird that somebody else saw. Describe the bird's vocalizations, if given. A lot of times you won't ever hear anything. A lot of times you will. And you do the best you can to describe what you're hearing. Describe the specific habitat in which you observed it. Was it out in the middle of the lake? Out in the middle of the field? Alongside the road? Wherever. Sometimes birds are habitat specific. So you certainly wouldn't find a sprayed cricket out in the middle of the lake, would you? And if somebody did, then you know something's kind of up. Describe the behavior of the bird, habits if relevant to the identification. For example, wagging or flicking of the tail. And most times there won't be very much, really. But sometimes there are birds that require that. Describe the bird as it appeared in the field to you. Describe the size, overall shape, plumage, if you can, colors, tail and wing shape, etc., and so on. The number of them, sex if you can, if you will. And the last little line says, reference to its resemblance to a field guide description and illustration is not enough. Well, I've had some submitted to me like that. Looked like it did in page 93 in Peterson Eastern Field Guide. I mean, you wonder if anybody, if they even read the description there. And a lot of times, people will tell 20 lines of where it was, how they found it, something about trees, something about water. They'll tell you this whole story. I mean, you it's like you're there, but there won't be hardly any description about the bird. The first one, rare bird I found in the state of Mississippi, I called the professor and he told me, he said, well, you've got to make a write-up. The write-ups in 1985, they used terms like rectrices, wing covers, chrism, supercilium. And I called that professor back and I said, what is all this? So he said, well, if you're going to play with the big boys, you got to do what they tell you to. So what did I have to do? I had to look up all those parts. Well, now you can see it's not like that now. Much more simple. Because, you know, a wing bar is a wing bar. Not necessarily has to do with coverts and all that, even though it does. A tail is a tail. You don't have to use rectrices. You can make it simple, but you need to do it. What field guides and reference did you consult? A lot of us that have birded a long time, we don't very much look at a book because we know what we're seeing, but there, in your first several years, you do that. Were you aware at the time the observation was unusual? Sometimes people don't, sometimes people do. What is your previous experience with this in similar species? And how did you eliminate similar species? The only way you're going to know how to eliminate a similar species is to know if it's got a similar species, right? So you've got to get in your book. My brother-in-law told me the other day that he saw a cardinal with black wings. And my brother-in-law was kind of hard-headed. So I said, you did? I said, what color was his bill? Well, I didn't pay attention to the bill. So I got my trusty bird book out and I took it in there to him and I said, see if you can find that bird in the book. I wasn't about to ID the bird for him. So you see where I'm going. And I think sometimes I've heard Chris or people in your group like that have that problem. And the only way you can eliminate that is to know that there are similar species. And of course, your book's going to tell you that. Nothing else is going to tell you that. And there's a few little boxes down here that we want you to check if you've ID'd it prior to consulting your field guide. Some people like to ID and then look at their book and confirm it. That's cool. There's a little slot down there that you can put that on.
Can I add something, sir?
Sure.
I guess one thing I wanted to say was that it is really important to study your book and to know ahead of time. It really helps to know ahead of time before you go birding. You know, what are the possibilities? What are the similar species that you might encounter? If you find something rare, it's very useful to know ahead of time what else it could be. But if you don't, you can still potentially make a successful identification and really have a good time with it if you make really careful observations when you're watching the bird. You can take really careful notes, you can make a drawing or get a good photograph, and if you make careful notes about as many parts of the bird as you can, A, you've just learned something, it helps you look at the bird more carefully, but then B, potentially if you get back home and you realize, oh, you know, I didn't realize it could be a Bell's Vireo instead of something else, then if you've taken good notes on the bird, you can still potentially eliminate similar species afterwards. But if you don't carefully look at the bird and make good notes, then you're in trouble. Yes, Chris?
Along that line, I think when you're making field notes, you should make your field notes before you ever go to consult your guide, because our mind has a tendency to fill in blanks.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
And something on that same line that you're talking about, if you've got to the point where it's between one bird and another bird, and you look at your field guide and you see your field guide and the field guide points to a certain spot on that bird, you need to look. You look back at the bird and you say, well, yeah, I see that on that bird. So, and you can make in your notes say that you use the field guide and found out that I was supposed to see a white place wherever, that you use that for your notes.
I have a situation that happened just a couple of weeks ago. And I've only been birding a year and a half. I have really tried hard to learn and read the books, and I'm working on my birding by ear. But I was alerted to a place here close to where I live where they have painted bunnies. And so I was on the hunt for painted bunnies. And I got out there, and within 10 minutes of seeing two birds in two trees, the distance was from here to where you're standing, two birds. There was a bird that was both bunting size. One was absolutely positively the painted bunny, so I'm freaking out over the painted bunny. Next to it was a bird who was a little bit different shade of a blue than an indigo, who had a white belly, a red breast, and white wing bars. I'm thinking, what an interesting bird that is, because, although I'm still new, I figured it was a female of somebody else that I knew and didn't think anything about it. And continued to stare and watch the painted bunny because he was stunning. A little farther down the road, we found a blue grosbeak, and I wanted to look at the difference between the blue grosbeak and the indigo bunny. And that's when I saw this lazuli bunting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I saw this bird. Because it was literally what I had, it was perfect. It was a skinny blue bird with white wing bars. But in this case, I'm still new. I literally texted Chris because I said, this bird's in Texas or somewhere else. It's in the West. It's not supposed to be here. And a little while later, it was at 7 o'clock when I saw the bird the first time. The second time we saw the bird was at 10. And we definitely he was much further off. My partner saw the white wing bars. He definitely said we have white wing bars. So I emailed Ken Hackman because he was the one that told us about the painted bunnies and said, come out here. And he wasn't able to get out there until after a big rainstorm. And, nobody was able to confirm it by eyesight. That was the one and only time he was seen. But for somebody like me that is new, would y'all, I told Chris, I said I didn't even feel like trying to alert, the real people because I'm still too new to actually, I didn't even know what I was looking at the first time I saw him.
No, when Mother Nature turns you on, she'll turn you on. No matter whether you've been birding 15 minutes or 50 years. So what you want to do is you want to fill out a report. I ran across that, Shannon and I ran across that in our first 5 years in the north part of the state all the time. I would call the professor and say, I got a soar out in the middle of a cotton field. And he said, what? I've never seen a soar around here. Walk out there, 3 soars jump up out of the grass, and American bitter. So So you're birding and doing it, that's what you do. And when you find species that aren't supposed to be here, and you've got all the details already. If that's what you saw, you need to fill out a form for us.
So that, I mean, if y'all aren't gonna sit here and think, oh, this girl's a nut, because Chris will also tell you, I'll send him something that says, oh, I saw a Louisiana water thrush, and he said, right, make sure it's not such and such and such and such. Well, in this case, I really think I had the lazuli down, Louisiana water thrush.
Nobody can challenge you, because that list proves that. Shannon and I saw northern goshawks, north part of the state, 3 different times. Nobody would believe us. I fill out the reports, they go through the records committee, and there were people going, there's no way they saw that, it doesn't belong here, back then. So, all of a sudden, one year, I get a call from the professor, and he says, we've got an adult northern goshawk in a ditch, right in Oxford. That bird is in the museum as a specimen. It was hit by a car, injured, and it ended up dying. See? So, yes, anything like that, we want to know about. We're not up here to judge you as a birder. We judge what you put on that piece of paper. I've reviewed species records for years from people all over this state. And like I was saying, you'd be surprised what they don't put on that piece of paper. And they got all the chance in the world to fill out all the details and put on that piece of paper. Does that answer your question?
So, regardless of what we're looking at, you want us to go ahead and fill it out? And
I don't care who you are, how old you are, doesn't make any difference. If you take that documentation form and you fill it out and you give it to us, then we'll submit it to the records committee and they'll take it from there.
And if you do it well and you are careful about filling it out and you write a thorough description of the bird, you're going to be ahead of the game, because half the people who send these things in don't fill it out very well. So, if you take your time and really carefully describe the bird, and the committee's going to judge for itself, and that may or may not get accepted by the committee, but it's really important to go ahead and fill it in. And just getting out like you're doing, you make your own luck, and you're going to run into some stuff that's rare. And just because you're a relatively new birder doesn't mean you're not going to run into your share of interesting birds. The other thing I want to say is you did the right thing by contacting other birders and letting them know, so they 100% thing, just alert people and give them a chance to try to confirm it. And
you're not always able to show somebody else.
Right.
I mean, it's cool if you do. That's one of the greatest things about bird watching, is to share your sightings with your compadres. But you can always do that. I found an adult little gull, one that was in that drawing a while ago, and at the time there was only 2 people in the state of Mississippi that ever seen a little gull. So I was just busting at the seams to show Shannon and show everybody else in that area a little gull, because they were real rare. But eventually we did, and then I think 7 or 8, 10 people got to see it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to share your sightings. But nevertheless, you should just take it on yourself and just do these reports. I mean, I filled out 35, 40 of those things before anything got accepted. I still got them, and they're with the records committee now, but they're prior to 1990. We throw them up there once in a while and let people vote on them. A lot of that goes on. This is one right recently that Jason had up there in Oxford. It's a Buick's Wren. And he went down through the whole thing and looked like he did a pretty good job.
thanks, Gene.
Only bad thing about it, nobody else got to see it.
Yeah, I didn't have my camera with me either, so.
I'm not kidding you. In the 80s, if one person saw one of these rare things, unless he had a photograph, the written documentation wouldn't stand up to anything. So there was There was sure enough tough people on the records committee in those days. That was right after people shooting and taking specimens. I think the last specimens shot in the state were in the 70s by Marvin Davis, like a little girl and a black-legged kitty up there. Final message before lunch. Is it lunchtime already?
Got a little time for some questions and answers before we have to leave for lunch.
And I think we've probably covered some of the importance of record keeping and documenting the rare birds. And it's not, it's not all about rare birds all the time. For us it is, but for you being new birders and amateur birders and people real interested in it, you still got to go through learning what's in your yard, what's in your state, and just learn. There's no fast way to do it unless you are J.R. Rigby. Unless you got a photographic mind. And the only way to do it is to keep doing it. To do it in your yard, wherever you go, look at everything you see. That's the only way to do it.
Can I add something?
Okay.
There are the point I want to make is that there are a lot of different aspects of birding that are valuable and fun. Some of the thrill is just getting out and seeing cool birds that you've never seen before. Some of it occasionally is to find something rare, but I would say that for all of us, the data that you're collecting on the common birds is really valuable too. And what we're going to talk about after lunch is a way to harness the power of those data on common birds. So finding rare birds is really fun, and it does drive a lot of what birders end up spending their time on. But I really like the fact that collecting data on the common birds can be valuable as well. And eBird is a big part of that. So that's partly what we'll talk about after lunch.
He will discuss the eBird part after a while. All these records and information that you send into MOS becomes a part of our bird database, permanent. Without your information, we don't know how to do the checklist. We can't add birds to the checklist. We can't figure out whether they're common, whether they're fairly common, or whether they're rare or what. So this information, just like on what he says on the whole checklist has got all the common birds of the state. Several years ago, we started having invasions of dove. It's not only mourning doves and rock pigeons. There's the new Eurasian collar dove. I know everybody's seen them everywhere. When we first started bird watching, white-winged dove was a rarity in the state. You could only find them on the Gulf Coast. And look at them now. They're in a lot of places in the state, probably breeding under our noses, don't know it. It probably hasn't been 15 years ago that little Inca dove is invaded from the west, and now they're nesting abundantly in the delta. They're now across the Gulf Coast. So see, without keeping up with these species that are new to the state and how much they're being found, with your data when you send in the eBird or whether you send it into MOS, that's how we use that. Here's some things that we would like you to consider if you join MOS. We put out a newsletter twice a year, and it's mainly that tells you about when the next meeting is, where it's going to be, that kind of thing. It'll have all the bird species we encountered on the meeting prior to that one, have other little bird stories in it and such. Comes out twice a year prior to the meetings, spring and fall. The Mississippi Kite is our journal. It has had articles of different birding stories. We keep up with, I mentioned a while ago, birds around the state, which is a lot of those uncommon to rare forms you send into us. It goes into that. A lot of that is sent on to American Birds and published nationally. through our newly started Delta Windbirds organization, Jason, J.R. Rigby, and myself, we're giving discounted registration for those events if you belong to MOS. We've had a lot of the northern part of the state's members and part of the Tennessee people up there have joined MOS just to get discounts on Delta Windbirds outings. MOS has biennial meetings around the state. We do it twice a year. Spring will be one place, not necessarily the same place. It could be from north to the south, and so will the fall. This next meeting, Jason has put these dates out recently, will be September 19th through 21, based in Greenwood. We always have programs. We have featured speakers. This Kevin Carlson, we've about got notched in for it. He's one of the top shorebird persons in the United States. Some of the likely birds we encounter when we bird watching the Delta in the fall are bunches of wood storks, showy roseate spoonbills, umpteen species of shorebirds. I think last year we had large numbers of American avocets with black-necked stilts, a real showy big shorebirds, always real cool birds to see. So if you want to join, if you are joined, good. If you want to join, we got brochures up here to help you do that. So I guess this is going to end this part of it, and after lunch Jason's going to do a part on using eBird and this relationship and reporting to birds and MOS, and we'll have a question and answer period. I hope everybody's going to come back after lunch.
Since we have just a couple extra minutes, can I do a quick exercise?
Sure.
Is everybody okay with that? All right, so let's try something that I thought of beforehand, but I didn't think we'd have time. I'm going to put up a bird, and we're going to practice taking notes on a bird here. That's a pretty good one.
Stroll on around it to that legend bunting.
Well,
Oh,
Now that you've told us what to do.
you can't say what the bird is ahead of time.
oh, well,
We can look at that photo if you'd
let
like.
Nancy look at that bird.
There
then
you
you-
go.
Let's see here. So, here's your leisurely bunting.
Ooh.
Yeah.
This was the leisurely bunting that was found last of March, 1st of April on the Gulf Coast of Lady Speed.
All right.
Is that what you saw, Nancy?
It's just Michelle, but yes, that's
Michelle?
exactly what I saw. I would say that's what I saw. I mean, that's one of those things that's so hard because he was right next to the painted bunting in the other tree. So, like I said, it was, look, that's an interesting bird. I'm sure it's a female of something. And then didn't even, I kept on looking at the painted, but then it stuck in my memory because it was just something so different.
All right. So what I want you to do, if you have pen or pencil and paper, is just take a couple minutes to write down a description of this bird. And I'm not going to bias you by telling you what to write down. Just write down. If you don't have something to write with, just do it in your head. Try to make a mental notes of what you're seeing. And then I'm just going to give you a minute to do that, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do next. Is it?
He's sitting on there still.
Behavioral notes are important, yeah. I can tell you he was walking around in a kind of a dirt ditch area next to a road out in the Delta, in the middle of the winter.
Making his little fine dress.
Some little fine grass. Did a lot of walking. Occasionally a little flying, but a lot of walking. One thing that Gene mentioned that I want to emphasize is that sometimes getting in the habit of just trying to describe a bird is just a really good way to learn. You know, it doesn't even have to be a rare bird. In fact, making yourself write down or try to draw a description of a common bird that you see every day, I bet you'll notice things on that bird you've never noticed before. You know, on American robin, have you ever noticed how the tips of the outer tail feathers are white? Little white pockets on the outer tail feathers. Little things like that you wouldn't notice until you start making a drawing of the bird.
I found a robin nest years ago, and the only thing I could see on the bird was his tail hanging over the nest. And there was those little white edges. And for the life of me, I could not think of what that bird was. So I ended up throwing a stick up that way and making it flush, and when it stood up and I saw there was a robin, I was going, okay.
We don't advocate throwing sticks at birds as a rule. All right.
I think that was the second year bird was.
Yeah, all right. We'll excuse you then. Okay, 2 minutes yet of to describe the bird. 1 minute left.
I know the first thing my wife's going to put down. Please.
We'll see. He's not writing anything down. It's all up here. Okay, so what I want to do is go around and just hear from people. What did you write down? And you don't have to say everything that you write down. I just want you to mention one thing, and we'll kind of go around. And what I think will be interesting is to hear what other people wrote down, because it'll probably be a little different from everyone. There's no reason to be shy or embarrassed. It's not, you know, none of it is wrong. Just it's what it looks like to you. And I think it'll be educational to just hear from folks. Tom, are you willing to start with something?
Yeah, I'll start out saying overall streaky appearance, wrist less streaky than the rest of it.
Yeah, overall streaky, but the breast less streaky than the rest of it. So there's some streaks on the upper breast there, definitely important. And so you're noticing though some streaks on the upper side.
Underbill, his bill is yellow underneath.
Yes, that is true. The lower mandible is a different color than the upper mandible. It's sort of hard to tell what the color is. I think it's kind of a pinkish or yellowish, yeah. But let's stick to the streaks for a minute. I think that's something that I was going to be surprised if we got to that right away, and Tom picked it out right away. That's an important characteristic for identifying this bird, is the fact that the back is kind of streaked. How many other people noticed that? They're good, okay. So this particular species, which we'll get to in a minute. The bill, you're right about the color as well. That's a good point. Nancy, what did you have?
It stands. It's kind of upright. Kind of, it's, sparrow-like bird, but it's got kind of a robin's upright stance.
Posture is a really important thing to note. Posture can be so important. Yeah. Yes, back there.
Well, he has that white, looks like sort of a white stripe over his eye.
Yeah.
And then on the edge of his wings, I put white scallops. It's kind of a scalloping pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
With dark centers on the different segments. That's really interesting. Right
Yeah.
there, the scallops,
Yep, so,
and then the dark centers.
good, so those would be white, what we would call white wing bars. And these are covert feathers over the wings, over the flight feathers on the wings, and that's what makes a white wing bar, is the tips of those coverts are white, and then the bases of those feathers, the majority of them are dark. And that is a really distinctive thing that stands out on this bird, 2 white wing bars, yep, absolutely.
Is that a bar over the eye?
Yeah, so someone just mentioned that as well. There's kind of a pale line here, and then did anyone write down the ring? Anyone write down a white eye ring? Yeah.
Is it an incomplete eye ring or is it a complete eye ring?
I
From here,
put
it looks like
partial.
complete.
That's a good question. I think that's probably something that from one photo is difficult to tell. But if you were watching the bird, you would see that it was a complete eye ring, and it is a complete eye ring. That is a good. It brings up an important point though, which is that it can be dangerous sometimes to come home with just and try to look from a single photograph and figure out what a bird is, because there are certain characteristics that are tough to see on photos at all, like certain aspects of color don't show up well on certain photos, especially if you got the light in a certain direction, that can really change the color. So photographs are really valuable, but there's also some ways that photographs can be really misleading and make it difficult. So you have to combine, if you're taking photographs, make sure that you also really watch the bird in the field and write down as much as you can, because some of the details you're going to have to fill in from your field observations, and they won't show up well in the photos. So that's a good question. It kind of looks like a partial eye ring there, but that would be a full eye ring. Yes?
The overall shape of the bird, it's rounded, you can see it's not a sparrow. You know, it's got a rounded
Yeah.
breast in the front.
Yeah, kind of heavy looking belly almost as well.
And the length of the pole is about half the
Half the length of the
yeah,
head.
half of the head.
Yeah, good.
It
That's
doesn't have a long, it's
that's
not a
really
long
good.
but a very short, like a sparrow. The shape of the ball is pointed, it's not that. It's
yes.
not like a sparrow.
Very good. So someone mentioned the bill color, but from what we had heard so far about the bill, it could have been this long, could have been curved, it could have been curved up. So what you just did was describe the shape, which is a really important aspect of a description. And also, what I really liked about that was that it was a relative description of the bill size. Because, this bird could be, from just the photo, all we know is the relative proportions. This bird could be 3 feet long or this big. For all we know, it's really helpful to have relative descriptions of parts of the bird, like the bill size relative to the head. That's a great description of bill
The color of
size.
the legs are pink, it's not black.
Yes, yep, pink legs. Anyone else write down the pink leg color? Yeah. What else?
Buff-colored auriculars.
Sorry?
Buff-colored auriculars.
Oh yeah. So the cheek patch, the cheek feathers here are auriculars or ear coverts. These feathers are kind of buffy, and there's some streaks there. I noticed this dark border down here as well. It's sort of framed with a dark border above and kind of a pale border up above. Who else? Yes?
Yes, and I call it a mustache bar. I don't know if that's the right word. Mustache bar and a buffy or white throat.
Yeah, good. So that's great, and it's not even that important to know what it's called as much as that you noticed it. That's good. It's that dark line going from the base of the bill down along the side of the throat. Depending on its exact position, that might be a malar stripe or a lateral throat stripe, but it's an important thing to know.
What
Yeah.
about the size of his toes? Would that indicate that he's more of a ground?
Yeah, probably. It's a good point.
White outer feathers.
Sorry?
White outer feathers.
White outer tail feathers, good. That is something that in a photo you might think, are those white outer tail feathers or not? But on a different view of maybe a different photo, and definitely behaviorally, when that bird flew, you could definitely see white outer tail feathers. So that's an important point. What else?
My husband says he's smiling, but I can't see it.
I think it was a pretty happy bird in general. He got seen by a lot of people. Anything else?
The darker crown.
Yeah, the crown is kind of dark. Also streaked, right? Streaked crown, yeah. Yes, over here?
What comes out to me is the boldness of how much the eye sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
The head shape is pretty flat. These are just some of the things that we haven't noticed yet. The wings are awfully short relative to tail length.
Yeah, so this is something that it really helps to look at those diagrams of bird anatomy at the beginning of your field guide, and so that you can start to look at a bird and see individual feathers. So it's important to be able to see a bird and know that that's the tip of the wing right there. That's the end of the primaries right there. And that's really useful information. And then what he was suggesting is that that's that tip there where that ends, and then you've got a lot of tail sticking out beyond that. That's an important relative proportion thing as well. And some birds, some species of birds, their wings extend past the tip of their tail. And others, it's much shorter, and that's a really good thing to notice.
I just wrote down long tail, but I guess I was noticing, but not realizing what I was noticing, this
Yeah.
wings ended.
Yeah, I mean, it does have a long-tailed look and short-winged look as well, and those two things together contribute to the overall gestalt of the bird.
Actually, if you look at the bird, it looks as if the wings are too small to carry.
Yeah,
The wings are small in relation to the body of the bird.
yeah. What else? Anything? I like your point about the eye really being bold,
Well, I
dark
put
eye.
dark eye, but I
Yeah.
think that's, again, I agree with that. That's what caught my attention, was it stuck out, so.
Yep.
I'm not saying it is this, but some birds like buck-breasted sandpiper, upland sandpiper, the black eye just really sticks out in the
Yep.
head.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think this definitely falls into that category as well. Yep. Anything else? Gene, you have anything you to add to that?
Habitat.
Yeah, it's good to note the habitat as well, that it's on the ground. So, all right, who knows what it is? So good. Now, did you know before about this bird? Do you know what bird we're talking about? The sighting? Yeah. So, all right. So what is it?
The Sprague's pipit.
Yep. So this is a Sprague's pipit. Now, part of this exercise would be to say, all right, how do you tell it from similar species? So what are the similar species that we might be worried about? American pipit would be one. We have a lot of American pipits out in the Delta in the winter. What other similar species might you be concerned about? Any others? Maybe some kinds of sparrows. You might be concerned about.
Well, what is the relative size of the bird? I mean, you can't tell that from a picture. That could be a 4-inch bird, that could be an 8-inch bird.
It's a good point. It's probably somewhere in between those two. Yeah.
That's pretty
Kind
good
of a-
size. Robin.
Is it robin size or smaller than a robin?
Smaller than a robin. Smaller than a robin.
It's the size of America Day.
Yeah. Same size as a pipit. Yeah. Pipit size.
Smaller than a robin, but bigger than a sparrow.
Yeah. Bigger than most sparrows. Yeah.
I mean, that's a big difference there. I mean, that to me is a field one.
Yep, and that's an important thing to write down. That's a really good point, actually. In the field, if you have a rare bird or an unusual bird, whether you know what it is or not, it's really useful to note its size relative to things that you do know. So if you can say it was bigger than a nearby savanna sparrow. We had a lot of savanna sparrows in this area at this time. This was Sprague's pipit that Gene found in Panola County, just northwest of Batesville, back in December, and a lot of people got to see it. There were a lot of savanna sparrows around. There were American pipits in the area, and if you could see this bird near some of those other birds, smaller than a killdeer, bigger than a savanna sparrow, that's really useful. With
Horned lark.
oh yeah, horned lark, about the same size as a horned lark maybe. This is a great thing to do with rare birds like gulls, especially. Bigger than a ring-billed gull, but wow, it's smaller than the nearby herring gulls as well. So, kind of in between size. That's really useful information. It's hard to get that from a single photo like this, but when in the field, you can note those things. Any other thoughts about this bird? Did you learn something from that? Kind of hearing what other people are noticing. I think it's really cool how different people notice different things. But I think everything I heard from you all was valuable information to write down. And that's useful for documenting a rare bird and figuring out what it is. It's useful if you have a common bird, but you're not sure what it is. It's also useful for learning something. If you just want to take some leisurely time birding and not worry about rare birds and reporting stuff and what other people are going to think. Just learning, just being out there, noticing stuff, drawing things and writing, just trying to write down descriptions of birds is a great way to learn as much as you can. Chris?
One of the things that I use and I encourage people to use is that digital voice recorder. It doesn't take very long to train yourself how to turn it on and hit that record button without ever taking your eyes away from your bird. You can just audibly start calling out field marks and recording.
That's a good idea, because then your hands are not tied up writing down stuff.
You never take your eyes off the bird.
Yeah, keep an eye on the bird. It's a good idea.
Michelle got me to the point now where I just hooked that with the carabiner on my binoculars.
Huh, that's a great idea.
But when you get home, what do?
You download it into your computer and listen to them, and then you.
You write it in your journal.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just a transfer medium.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of what especially if it's a cooperative bird and it's hanging out for quite a long time, when it finally flies away, the first thing that you noticed is the farthest away from where you're at to the point where you're writing in your journal and you may have forgotten.
Yep, and you can talk faster than you can write.
Absolutely.
Also, there's no substitute for making a drawing as well.
Right.
But yes.
One of the things that I try to encourage, and I try to do myself, whether I'm by myself or whether I'm with friends and we're all staring at something that wasn't a 2-second look and then it flew away, but still there for a while, is to, after you, the heart slows down enough that you actually sort of look at it for a minute and the initial excitement wears off, is to just start doing verbally what we did just now, of just going through the bird and talking out loud to the people beside you, going, yes, what's the shape of the bill? And yeah, it's got a yellow lower mandible, and the upper mandible's kind of darker, and the crown on the head is kind of flat, and it encourage the people you're standing next to go, do you agree with that or not? Yeah. And when you're talking this out loud, then when you get home, if you haven't written notes in the field, you've still gone through the process of talking this out. And rather than just staring at the bird going, oh, wow, boy, this is great, I'm going to be able to check this off, kind of thing, that you're really much more likely to write down what that bird looked like rather than write down what the picture in the field guide looked like.
Yep, absolutely. The act of talking it out is really valuable for helping your brain to retain it.
Yeah, Chris, I know I would do better if I had a tape recorder, but just even talking it out, I think it's very valuable.
Well, that's probably another value of the tape recorder, is it gets you talking about it, and just that act helps. And then the other thing is what you're suggesting really helps take advantage of the group. So if you are lucky enough to be out with other birders, each person's going to be focusing in on different things, and you can help each other notice things that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise. That's really valuable too.
Well, and two, in that scenario of calling it out with different birders, somebody may have a different view. For instance, out of St. Cass, you see a small peep, but well, the legs are yellow. No, actually, they're not. That's the sun hitting it. I saw it a while ago in a shadow, and the legs are actually dark. Mm-hmm. So, a way to kind of counterbalance some of the traps that you might fall into.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for tolerating that. What's that? Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good signal, I think. Maybe we'll all run out of juice and need some fuel. So I don't know. Where were people thinking?